Aliens thought projectile weapons were outdated, until the human brought his rifle to class. You ever watch someone do something so stupidly dangerous that your brain just stops working? Yeah. That's what happened when Professor Marcus Webb walked into advanced weapons theory carrying what looked like an antique death stick from the Dark Ages. And trust me, I've seen some weird stuff in my 17 cycles at the Galactic Military Academy. My name is Vex the Lion, but everyone just calls me Vex, because apparently 3 syllables is too much effort for most species. I'm a Krell, which means I've got 4 arms, scales that shimmer like oil on water, and an unfortunate tendency to overthink everything. It's why I ended up in weapons engineering instead of something sensible like hydroponics. The lecture hall buzzed with the usual pre-class chatter. Normally, Professor Webb taught us about plasma accelerators, quantum disruptors, the kind of tech that could punch holes through reality if you weren't careful, cutting-edge stuff, the kind of weapons that made sense in a galaxy where faster-than-light travel was as common as breakfast. Then he walked in with that thing. "Good morning, class," Webb said, his voice carrying that peculiar human accent that always sounded like he was chewing on gravel. "Today we're going back to basics." My best friend Thrin, a Vulgari with too many eye stalks and not enough common sense, leaned over. "Is that what I think it is? If you're thinking ancient projectile weapon that belongs in a museum, then yes," I whispered back. Webb set the rifle down on his desk with a heavy thunk that echoed through the suddenly silent hall. 300 students from 70 different species, all staring at this primitive instrument like it might explode. Which, knowing human history, it probably could. "This," Webb announced, patting the weapon like it was a pet, "is a Springfield M1A. Chambered in 7.62mm NATO. Effective range, about 800 meters. Rate of fire depends on how fast I can pull the trigger. Technology level, approximately 300 Earth years old." Someone in the back, I think it was one of the Zephyrian twins, actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle, a full-blown cackle that said everything we were all thinking. "What's the point?" Webb smiled. Humans have this way of smiling that makes you deeply uncomfortable, like they know something you don't, and they're about to make it your problem. "I see some skepticism," he said, picking up the rifle with practiced ease. "Let me guess. You're all thinking, why would anyone use chemical propellants when we have directed energy weapons? Why mechanical firing pins when neural interfaces exist? Why bullets when we have antimatter?" Exactly what I was thinking, actually. "Allow me to demonstrate." Webb pulled back something on the rifle, a bolt, I think humans call it. The sound was sharp, mechanical, satisfyingly solid. "Miss Kirillin, you're from Nexus Prime, correct?" Kirillin, a 6-limbed Etherian with gorgeous bioluminescent patterns, nodded nervously from the 3rd row. "Your people use standard-issue plasma carbines, Mark 7, if I'm not mistaken. How long does it take to charge a shot?" 0.03 seconds, Professor. "And how many shots before the coolant system needs cycling?" 42 continuous shots, sir." Webb nodded. "Excellent weapon. Really top of the line. Now watch this." What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about warfare. Webb raised the rifle, aimed at the ballistic gel dummy we used for impact testing, about 50 meters away at the far end of the hall. The sound when he fired was nothing like the clean whoosh of plasma or the electric snap of particle beams. It was brutal, a crack that felt like someone punching reality in the face. The rifle jerked, Webb compensated instantly, and a chunk of the dummy's torso just ceased to exist. Before anyone could process that, he fired again, and again, and again. The rhythm was insane, faster than any of us expected. Each shot punched through the dummy, through the armor plating behind it, through the secondary barriers we thought were overkill. 10 shots in 3 seconds. No charge time, no cooldown warnings, no thermal alerts. Just raw, mechanical violence. The last echo faded. Smoke drifted from the rifle's barrel, and the smell, this acrid chemical stench, filled the lecture hall. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. "Chemical propellants," Webb said, conversationally, like he hadn't just committed murder on a training dummy. Don't care about electromagnetic interference. Don't need power cells. Don't generate thermal signatures your enemies can track. This rifle will fire in vacuum, underwater, in a plasma storm during a solar flare. It'll fire when your fancy energy weapons are expensive paperweights. He set the rifle down again, and before you ask, yes, humans still use these, extensively. Thrin's eye stalks had gone completely rigid, a sign of serious cognitive distress. But the ammunition. You'd need to carry hundreds of rounds. The weight alone. 300 rounds in basic loadout, Webb confirmed. About 15 kilograms total. Heavy? Yes. But tell me what happens when your plasma carbine runs out of charge in hostile territory. Silence. We all knew the answer. You die. Whereas I can reload this. Webb pulled a metal box from his bag, in under 2 seconds. 30 rounds. And I've got 9 more magazines where this came from. Professor Dalrex, our head of defensive systems and a veteran of the Crithian border wars, stood up from where he'd been observing in the back. He was a Thorian, built like a tank with armor plating that could shrug off small arms fire. Professor Webb, with all due respect, kinetic weapons were phased out for good reason. Energy weapons are simply more efficient. Are they? Webb's smile got wider. Definitely uncomfortable now. Efficiency isn't just about energy transfer, Dalrex. It's about reliability, versatility, logistics. Tell me, how long does it take to manufacture a plasma carbine from raw materials? With standard fabricators, approximately 40 hours. And a rifle like this? Dalrex hesitated. I don't know. 18 hours with basic machine tools. 6 hours in a proper factory. The ammunition, even less. And here's the really fun part. Webb picked up one of the bullets from his desk, held it up so everyone could see. Copper jacket, lead core, simple and ancient. This technology is so simple, so robust, that even primitive civilizations can manufacture it. Which means if you're stranded, if you're cut off from supply lines, if you're fighting an asymmetric war against an enemy with superior resources, these work. I felt my scales prickling. That instinctive response Krell get, when we realize we've miscalculated something important. Around me I could see the same realization spreading through the class. We'd been so focused on advancement, on newer and better, that we'd forgotten the fundamental question, does it work? Next week, Webb announced, we're going to the range. All of you. You're going to fire these outdated, primitive, absolutely lethal weapons. And then we're going to have a very serious discussion about assumptions. He paused, letting that sink in. Class dismissed. Nobody moved for a solid 10 seconds. Then, like a dam breaking, everyone started talking at once. The firing range sat 3 levels below the main academy campus, carved into solid bedrock, because apparently when humans design things, they assume everything will eventually explode. Smart, honestly. I'd spent the entire week watching archived human combat footage. Big mistake. Huge. Turned out humans had this nasty habit of winning wars they had absolutely no business winning, usually because they showed up with projectile weapons. Everyone else had dismissed as obsolete. You look stressed, Thrin observed as we descended in the gravity lift. His eye stalks were doing that nervous twitch thing again. I'm reassessing my entire educational focus, I said. It's fine, totally fine. I haven't slept in 3 days. I keep calculating ammunition trajectories in my head. That's called learning, buddy. The range was massive. 50 individual firing lanes, each one reinforced with ablative armor that could supposedly withstand sustained plasma fire. Today, those lanes were occupied by confused students holding rifles that looked almost comically primitive next to our usual equipment. Professor Webb stood at the center platform, somehow looking relaxed despite being surrounded by 300 aliens who'd never held a kinetic weapon before. Recipe for disaster, if you ask me. All right, listen up. Webb's voice boomed through the range speakers. You've all been assigned into groups of 10. Each group has a range instructor. You will follow their directions exactly, or you will be removed. These weapons are dangerous in ways your energy weapons are not. There's no safety lock, no biometric failsafe. You point it wrong. someone dies. We clear. A nervous chorus of acknowledgements rippled through the crowd. My group's instructor was Lieutenant Hayes, a human woman who looked like she could bench press a small shuttle. She held up her rifle with one hand, which should have been impossible given the weight distribution, but humans are weird about physics. This is an AR-15 platform, she said. Lighter than what Professor Webb showed you, fires a smaller round, 5.56 millimeter, effective range about 500 meters. We're starting simple, because I don't want anyone dislocating shoulders today. Can that actually happen? Asked Krell, a nervous Centauri with translucent skin. Hayes grinned. Oh, absolutely. Recoil's a real thing with these. Your plasma weapons? No recoil, energy just goes forward. Bullets? Equal and opposite reaction. Physics doesn't care about your feelings. She walked us through the basics. How to hold it, how to aim, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger instead of pulling it. Seemed like a lot of fuss for pointing and shooting, but humans were weirdly particular about these things. Vex, you're up first, Hayes said. Of course I was. I approached the firing line, 4 arms giving me what I thought would be an advantage. The rifle felt heavy, solid, real in a way energy weapons never did. Those always felt like holding expensive air. Targets at 50 meters, Hayes said, standing beside me. Center mass. Just like we practiced. Remember, squeeze, don't jerk. I lined up the sights, those primitive mechanical bits of metal, with the target downrange. Took a breath, squeezed. The rifle kicked like an angry Thorian. The sound was incredible, even through ear protection. And the target, the distant piece of synthetic flesh, sprouted a hole exactly where I'd aimed. Not bad, Hayes said. Again, 5 rounds. By the 5th shot I was starting to understand. This wasn't about technology, it was about connection. Every shot required attention, focus, compensation. You couldn't just point and hold down a trigger, you had to be present for each individual round. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and absolutely terrifying. Thrin went next. His first shot went so wide it hit the ceiling. His second hit the floor. By his third, he'd figured out the eye-stalk coordination issue and actually tagged the target. You're all doing better than I expected, Hayes admitted after we'd each fired 30 rounds. Most species take longer to adapt. Must be all that theoretical training Webb puts you through. Question, I said, ejecting my magazine like she'd taught us. Why do humans still train with these so extensively? You've got access to galactic standard weapons now. Hayes smiled, and I was starting to recognize that particular expression. It meant incoming wisdom that would probably ruin my worldview. 2 reasons. First, these work everywhere, every time, no excuses. Second, and this is important, she loaded a fresh magazine into her rifle with practiced speed. They make you a better shooter with everything else. You master kinetic weapons. Energy weapons become easy. But if you only train with energy weapons, you never learn the fundamentals. Recoil management, breath control, trigger discipline, all of that translates. From across the range, someone screamed. Not panic, excitement. One of the Corthian students had just achieved a perfect grouping, 5 shots within a centimeter at 100 meters. Professor Webb was actually applauding. There's something else too, Hayes continued, her voice quieter. Your energy weapons, they're precise, clean, efficient, almost too efficient. They don't teach respect for violence. But these, she hefted her rifle, these are loud, messy, brutal. Every time you fire you're reminded that you're using lethal force. Makes you think twice. Makes you careful. That actually made sense. How many times had I seen students treat plasma carbines like toys? They were so clean, so quiet, so controlled. Easy to forget you were holding something that could vaporize flesh. The afternoon wore on. Groups rotated through different weapons. Some handled better than others. All of them were eye-opening. The bolt-action rifles that required manual cycling between shots, teaching patience. The semi-automatic pistols that demanded precision at close range. Even an old shotgun that one of the Drexian students fell completely in love with, much to everyone's surprise. By hour 4, we were all exhausted in ways that energy weapons training never achieved. Physical, mental, emotional exhaustion from maintaining constant awareness of safety and accuracy. Professor Webb called everyone to the central platform as we finished. His expression was serious now, the earlier humor replaced by something harder. "You came here thinking you knew weapons," he said. "You thought older meant inferior, primitive meant useless. Today you learned different, but here's the real lesson. Pay attention." The entire range went silent. Technology advances, yes. We get better tools, more efficient systems, cleaner solutions. But war, combat, violence, these don't change. They're still brutal, still messy, still fundamentally about one person trying to stop another person permanently. And in that environment, the weapon that works is better than the weapon that's sophisticated. He picked up his Springfield again, the same rifle from last week. Humans learned this lesson the hard way, repeatedly, across centuries. We built weapons so advanced, they stopped functioning in real conditions. We designed systems so complex they failed when it mattered, and we died for it. So we kept these. He gestured around the range, not because we're primitive, but because we're survivors. Professor Dalrich stepped forward. The old Thorian looked like he'd aged a cycle in the past week. "I owe the class an apology. And you, Marcus? I fought in 3 wars using energy weapons exclusively. I lost soldiers because those weapons failed in conditions we didn't anticipate. If I'd known then what I know now, you'd have carried a rifle as backup?" Webb suggested gently. "At minimum." Webb nodded. "That's what I'm teaching here. Not to abandon modern weapons, but to understand that every tool has a place. Plasma carbines in ship corridors? Excellent choice. Particle beams for long-range space combat? Absolutely. But planet-side in variable conditions, against unpredictable enemies?" He patted his rifle. "These still work." As we filed out of the range, my mind was racing. I'd come to the academy thinking I'd learn about cutting-edge technology. Instead, I'd learned something more valuable. The best solution isn't always the newest one. "Hey Vex," Thrin said as we rode the gravity lift back up. "You think other species are going to start adopting kinetic weapons again?" I thought about it. Thought about the reliability, the simplicity, the brutal effectiveness we'd witnessed. Some will, the smart ones anyway. "You think humans planned this? Joining the galactic community, I mean, showing everyone their primitive weapons?" I laughed. "Knowing humans? Probably. They seem to enjoy proving people wrong." Behind us I could hear other students having similar conversations, excited debates about ammunition types, barrel lengths, effective ranges. Professor Webb had done more than teach us about weapons. He'd taught us to question assumptions, to value function over form, to respect the hard lessons learned by species who'd survived their own worst instincts. The next day, 300 students submitted requests to continue kinetic weapons training. Professor Webb had to add 2 additional sections to his course load, and somewhere in the academy archives, procurement officers started quietly researching human firearms manufacturers. Because in a galaxy full of species with energy weapons that could fail, sometimes the best defense was a rifle that absolutely, positively, would not. The humans had known this all along. They'd just been waiting for the rest of us to catch up. And me? I ordered my first rifle that evening. A Springfield M1A, just like Webb's. Because if I was going into the military, if I was going to put my life on the line, I wanted a weapon that would work when everything else failed. Turned out the humans were right about something else too. Respect for the weapon changes how you use it. And maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needed.